Register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Monday, May 18th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's jump right into the news. This economic response from the leadership of this country, both Democrat and Republican, the House of Representatives, of course, underneath the control and leadership of Nancy Pelosi. Critics say, according to MSNBC News or MSN News, that Congress is fumbling economic response to COVID-19. 10 weeks after President Trump signed the first coronavirus relief bill into law, many economists, business groups, lawmakers, and labor advocates contend that the multi-trillion-dollar response has been insufficient, misguided, or both. Continuing reading, it says, despite nearly $3 trillion in emergency spending, much of the economy appears to be in free fall, and there are warnings of a long and painful road to economic recovery. From a jobs perspective, it is as if we have done nothing. Well, yeah, we haven't. This is according to Damon Silvers, policy director of the AFL-CIO. He commented on the unprecedented actions taken by Congress, the White House, and the Federal Reserve. And I want to play a clip from 60 Minutes last night where the Fed chairman Jerome Powell talked about what should be done. He kind of said it in passing, but what he said was basically what we said months ago. But let me read this last paragraph here. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell warned last week that unless lawmakers adopt additional emergency measures, the downturn will deepen and could last for years to come. Additional fiscal support could be costly, but worth it if it helps avoid long-term economic damage and leaves us in a stronger recovery. All right, listen to this clip of what he said last night on 60 Minutes and tell me if what he says sounds familiar.
I don't give them advice on particular policies, but I would say, if I may, that policies that help businesses avoid avoidable insolvencies and that do the same for individuals. Keep workers in their homes, keep them paying their bills, keep families solvent.
Among the options, extending the increase in unemployment benefits, which expires in July, and supporting local governments which are struggling with a collapse in tax revenue.
That first part is the most important part. He said, keep the workers at home, keep them paying their bills, and keep them solvent. In other words, send us checks. They don't want to do this. Neither party wants to do this. Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, Democrats and Republicans, neither one wants to make a commitment to giving us, let's say, $2,000 a month per adult. I mean, honestly, I still don't know why your boy Jeff Bezos, whatever, isn't lobbying hard for this shit, because ultimately all that money is going to end up on Amazon and Instacart. But I digress. The point is that people will be able to continue to pay their bills and people can stay home. But instead, we have gone into this quote unquote warrior mentality to send people back out into, well, it's quasi warrior mentality, right? It's not even quasi. It's just you are a moron, but he wants you to call yourself a warrior, even though you are a lamb to the slaughter to this pandemic. There was a study, not a study, because I think we already have the evidence, but there was a report about the 5-week period that it actually takes you to go from infection and in some cases death. Right. So there's really like a 5-week delay in terms of when this virus actually takes you out. And a lot of people who have gone around this country and laughing I mean, it's just absurd how many people have been willing to put themselves out here for a sacrifice on the altar of capitalism. That's what they're actually doing. In their minds, they're bravely standing up against the tyranny of social distancing and quarantining. And it's really just a ticking time bomb for some people, not all people, right? Those are the things that I try to stress all the time. It's not everybody, but it is going to be somebody because the number of deaths are still going up. Here in Georgia, for them to make it look as though the death rate was going down, the Georgia Department of Health, under the leadership of Brian Kemp here in the state, they reversed the days on their graph. They put a day in April after a day in May to make it look as though the number of deaths were decreasing, as if people were not going to be able to figure that out pretty easily. So it's a level of absurdity that some Americans are willingly throwing themselves out there to be sacrificial lambs. For them, they think it's a thing of bravery and patriotism. Donald Trump has convinced them to call themselves warriors. On the other hand, in reality, rather, they are actually sacrificing themselves on the altar of capitalism. Why? Because, well, America does not want anyone to ever realize for a hot second that this country has long been able to solve the problem of poverty, solve the problem of the desperation that we have in living paycheck to paycheck, simply by opening up the coffers for the people like they do corporations. And now we're seeing even the neoliberal, I'm not championing the Fed chair, right? Let's understand the role that the Fed plays in all of this. But even they can see, hold up, we got to do something different, because if we don't, then we're going to destroy this economy in the long run. That's the thing. The actions being taken by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And for those people who are like, well, the Democrats aren't in charge, fine, I will reverse it and put it in a different order. By the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, being led by Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives, they do not want to take the step of showing America that this country has long been able to provide a universal basic income so that no one lives in poverty. And this is a time more than ever before to do so, because it will keep people from going out in this pandemic. But instead, they have allowed the ignorance culture to take root and to make this a culture war issue. And because of that, a lot of people are going to die. But what's more, the very economy that they're trying to preserve is going to be damaged almost irrevocably. For a very long time, we are going to be trying to recover from this pandemic, because they would not do the steps that are necessary now. Because if they did, then everyone would be like, oh, well, maybe the government can do more for the people than what it has been doing all of our lives. And that is something that they're willing to see this economy burn. They're willing to play a game of chicken, to look destruction in the eye, the destruction of this economy in the eye, to go to the proverbial edge, all for the sake of not allowing the people to know that the government can write a check to us, just like it's been writing a check to Wall Street, just like it's been writing a check to banks to bail out billionaires and corporations. All right. I want to continue on this coronavirus. Let me read a little bit from the Washington Post that backs up what I was discussing in terms of Georgia and Governor Kemp having to apologize. And I will segue into the main part of this segment. This is from the Washington Post discussing their article, "This Feels Great." It's a preview from Georgia about how America might reemerge from the coronavirus. Quote, "Eating, drinking, touching, and throwing caution to the wind." Here's the critical portion. It discusses versions of the pledge that are now being made all of the country as stay-at-home orders are being lifted. Businesses are opening, and millions of Americans now find themselves free to make millions of individual decisions about how to calibrate their sense of civic duty with their pent-up desires for the old routines and indulgences of life. In this grand gamble, Georgia has gone first, with Governor Brian Kemp, Republican, dismissing public health experts who've warned that opening too soon could cause a catastrophic surge of deaths, placing his faith instead on the citizens of Georgia to make their own minds up about what risk sacrifices they are willing to accept. God bless, he said, as he gave the order to reopen hair salons, nail salons, massage parlors, tattoo shops, restaurants, and retailers across the state. That order would be supported in the days ahead with, watch this, data on an official Georgia website claiming that confirmed cases in the state's hardest hit counties were in steady decline since the reopening. The claim would turn out to be erroneous and Kemp would issue an apology, but such details were not on any minds in the city of Avalon, where a middle-aged man calibrated, blah, 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 went on with the story, right? And so they opened the state up based on erroneous data. And now that they know that now that they have admitted that the data was erroneous, they've decided to go ahead with it anyway, because the data is also saying something very disturbing, which is what I want to discuss here. It's very transparent in terms of, like, it's not breaking news. We do know that this has had a disproportionate effect on African Americans more than any other group. Thus the term disproportionate. This is killing black people at a higher rate. But you would be surprised, perhaps, maybe not, that because of this, because black people are more at risk for this, white folks seem to be just okay with going out and opening everything back up because, hell, it's not going to hurt them as much as it hurts African Americans. Listen to this clip of Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar as he basically says as much, but tries to wrap it in flowery language as if he's concerned about black folks. But listen to his own words.
Jake, you can't celebrate a single death. Every death is a tragedy, but the results could have been vastly, vastly worse. It's also important to remember, Jake, as we
face it. But it's worse for us than it is for anyone else.
No, that's actually not factually correct. When you look at mortality rates, that's simply not correct as a percent of diagnosed cases, Jake. That every death is tragic.
Just looking at the number of dead bodies.
Every death is tragic, but we have maintained our healthcare burden within the capacity of our system to actually deal with it. Unfortunately, the American population is a very diverse and it is a population with significant unhealthy comorbidities that do make many individuals in our communities, in particular African American minority communities, particularly at risk here because of significant underlying disease, health disparities, and disease comorbidities. And that is an unfortunate legacy in our healthcare system that we certainly do need to address. But no, the response here in the United States has been historic to keep this within our healthcare capacity, even in New York City, to keep this within capacity is genuinely a historic result.
Never mind the fact that he's actively trying to rewrite history. All right, as we go, they're trying to write history in real time to make sure that America looks back at this and thinks that it was a historic result, right? Versus an abject failure, where now we're approaching 100,000 people dead in the last 2 months. We're like 88,000. So by June, by the end of May, 3 months total, we're probably going to be solidly into the 100,000 range. But they're actively trying to rewrite the history. But that's besides the point. Watch this. Back to the Washington Post. It says, quote, so far, most of the cases were in the part of the county closer to Atlanta, the poorer and more heavily African-American part, which is not the typical demographic of Avalon, the city where this entire story was written, where shoppers tended to be wealthy and white. Last but not least, in this article, they discuss two white guys out having a beer. One guy's name is Jeff. The other name is Scott. Jeff said, I think you have to live life, taking a sip of beer. Then Scott chimed in and said, when you start seeing where the cases are coming from and the demographics, I'm not worried. So he's not worried about him personally suffering and dying from this. But, so what if he goes out, contracts it, he lives just fine, passes it on to someone older, someone who's poorer, and someone who's darker. Because in this country, there is a strong correlation between your race and your health. And there's a strong correlation between your race and your economic condition. And there's a strong correlation between your economic condition and your health. But if you're white and you're wealthy, well, go out, enjoy a sunny day, and enjoy a beer while you spread your disease. I mean, come on, let's be real. Like the first cases here in Atlanta, the first cases in Atlanta came from a father and son, from a father who took his trip over in Italy, brought it from Italy, and then gave it to his son, and it started spreading from there. Those were the first cases we had reported here in Atlanta. So you brought your filthy disease here, and now it's spreading through poorer communities, and you're sitting back like, it's not going to hurt us. We're doing just fine. Oh, man, this is a bad spot for my patron music, but I'm going to pick this up after the patron party.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
At this point in every episode, we'd like to take a second to thank all of our newest patrons, without whom this show is entirely impossible. Very special welcome to Casey S. Thank you for becoming a patron. Dustin Drury, thank you for becoming a patron. Ahmad Khanna, thank you for becoming a patron. Andy Gladchester, I got you. Thank you for becoming a patron. Cher Payne, thank you for becoming a patron. Riley Young, thank you for becoming a patron. Jim Bovino, thank you for becoming a patron. Peter Funk, that's a hell of a name. Thank you for becoming a patron. Mike Lewis, thank you for becoming a patron. Everybody just bop. And here we go. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered, unedited interviews, and none of the annoying advertisements that you get right about here.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Yep. All right. So the patron party normally resets me, but I just put two and two together, and the narrative is extremely disturbing and parallels American history. The first cases that were reported in Atlanta in Georgia, Fulton County, was March 3rd, 2020. That was at the very beginning of all this. And it was from a father who was traveling abroad in Milan, Italy. He got back home February 22nd, and he was not showing any symptoms. This is according to WSBV TV, Channel 2. Several days later, the man came down with some symptoms. His son, who was 15, also later came down with some symptoms. Now, I'm willing to bet any dollar that this was a white man traveling abroad for business or pleasure, leisure. And if nothing else, he was an economically privileged man. Because how many of you have even been out of the country? How many working class people have been out of the country? This disease was brought to this country, not through, like President Trump tries to say, not through the border, right? They try to use this as an excuse to shut down and lock down the border even more with more draconian actions. Nope. It came to this country through people on planes, traveling abroad, bringing it to this country primarily from Europe. And it got to Georgia through this man who I still will bet any amount of money that he's a white man. And now that we see the reality of this, it's the disparities in health. It's the disparities. It's the economic disparities. And those economic disparities disproportionately affect black people. And now these white folks here in Georgia got the nerve to say, well, we look at where it's coming from. No, bitch, it came from you traveling abroad, bringing your nasty, filthy diseases here to our country. And now because you have enough money to live and to get the treatment and to not be have a lot of comorbidities, you want to act like, oh, this is not a white problem. This is not a white, elitist, wealthy problem. No, mother. So, as you can tell, it is the fact. I mean, it parallels history. How many times have Europeans, all right, have they brought their diseases to places and then just act like, oh, did I do that? Or more precisely, oh, we got nothing to do with this. Reopen the state. Because if you look at the demographics of where it's coming from, I'm not worried. Leaving minority groups, poor populations, older people, vulnerable, and devastated. I mean, utterly devastated. The insidious underlying racism in this disease and their complete dismissal, complete unconcern, like no regard whatsoever for the fact that you brought this shit here. And now they're going out and sitting on the lawns at their favorite restaurant, drinking beer and eating their freshly grilled nice salmon on top of their salad. While essential workers who are disproportionately minority and obviously poor are dying. The parallels when you juxtapose those two, the fact that it was brought here through airplanes, through people traveling abroad, I don't care if it was business or pleasure, vacation, or something serious, it came here from a group of people who had the money to survive it, had the money to be healthy all along, had the health care to make sure that they were always okay. I mean, they always had the time to go out for a jog and always had the money to afford a fresh salad with fresh vegetables and stay away from that processed food that you poor people have to eat. And now that they see, we're okay. We're okay. It's not really getting us. Let's open back up. Harming poor people, black people, even more. The arrogance, the sheer inhumanity, like the willingness to watch us die because of a disease that they are not as disproportionately affected by because of the economic plight of most African Americans in this country. Like, you cannot talk about one. We are not predisposed. This is the thing. Like, either you believe, and this is what I say all the time about anything when it comes to people throwing stats around about black on black crime, when people throw around stats about the comorbidities that exist in the black community. Either you believe that the African American body is somehow uniquely different and the psyche is uniquely different, or there are other underlying issues that you don't want to talk about when it comes to, let's say, something like crime. Right? Either these people are saying that black people are more predisposed to crime, or there are underlying issues that they refuse to talk about, and that's always the case. Similarly, they refuse to talk about the underlying issues that make black people have far more comorbidities than any other group, and that makes us so much more susceptible to this disease. But they will not talk about that. Hell, now, and this is not just the racial component, right? This is not just the racist Republicans. I mean, you got Democrats, you got black folks who go out on television and do the bidding of the same people who are sitting back and watching us die by not wanting or refusing to engage in the conversation about the economic condition of black people in this country. And by refusing to institute policies that would help us. Medicare for all. So many black folks can't even go to the doctor. But you want us to go pick up your motherfucking groceries and deliver them to you on time and make sure that we have our mask and our gloves on when we bring you your groceries to your house. I'm sorry, but we're already living in a dystopia. So I just encourage black people, poor people of any race, anybody in a marginalized group, absolutely refuse to participate in this system anymore. Just take a step back and completely reevaluate what are you even giving them your money for, right? Why are we even in this vicious cycle where we just work, give them our money, work, give them our money? We remember how we used to describe sharecropping, like we talked about sharecropping when we were learning about civil rights and Jim Crow, et cetera, and how demoralizing it was for someone to be a sharecropper, to give the fruits of their labor right back to the landowner. Yeah, that's what the hell we're doing now. It's just all digital. We work, and before we even see our check, our money is going right back to them. And now that they have brought a disease that only a wealthy person could bring us at the time, right? Of course, now it's just spreading person to person, club to club, restaurant to restaurant. But the way it got to this country was through someone on an airplane coming from abroad. And that wasn't anybody in the marginalized group that is dying from it now. Not a single person who is an essential worker, not a single person who is in a marginalized group who is dying from this right now is responsible for bringing it to this country. But yet those bastards are out chilling because in Georgia, particularly because when they look at the demographics, I'm not concerned. Mother you. A pox on all of your houses, a plague on all of your houses. Your people brought the disease here, and now you're sitting back looking at us dying and sipping your beer. Oh, you. Okay. All right. In other news, infuriating news, it is difficult to do the show. It's difficult to do the show right now, mainly because I don't think it's inordinately upset, but it is a rage. It is when you see the level of injustices around us, and then you see the people who are ostensibly supposed to be the opposition, and you see the machinations that they went through to make sure that there was no meaningful opposition against the thing that is currently killing us and destroying us, right? If you need me to make it plain, when you see what's going on in the world with coronavirus, and then you look at the party, the Democratic Party, which was supposed to be the opposition party, but they did everything they could to make sure that there was no meaningful opposition against Donald Trump. Everything makes you angry. It's impossible to look at what's happening around us and not be entirely infuriated every single day, which is why when I'm done doing the show, I unplug. I just pull the plug and I go do some music. I read a book. I do something other than politics. I swear on God, like it pushes me to a level of rage. And what's sad about it, what's depressing about it just a little is that there's not much that we can do within the electoral system as it is right now. Right? We are facing forces. Electoral politics is critical, but that's why it only comes around every 4 years. That's why they don't give us an option for a snap election. Look at what we're saddled with right now in the middle of this pandemic, at the beginning of this pandemic. We're saddled with the most unbelievably incompetent and narcissistic megalomaniac president in the history of this country, who is gladly sitting by, enriching his friends while people are dying, doing everything opposite of what needs to be done to save actual literal lives. And you mean to tell me there's nothing that we can do within the structure of this system to actually address this issue? So electoral politics matter, but the reason it matters, or because it matters, that's the only reason you get to vote only 4 years, every 4 years, right? Because if we were allowed a parliamentarian system where we could have a snap election, man, we would rock this place to no ends. But we can't. And that's what's frustrating. That's what's depressing about it. And now we're in a situation where we're waiting on Joe Biden to tell us who his vice presidential pick is going to be. And who even cares? Who even cares when the underlying issues, who cares when the underlying issues that are getting us killed are not going to be addressed? They may, the next president is going to be, first of all, it's structurally by November when we do the election, and most certainly by January when he's gone, January 21st when he's gone, the die would have been cast. So that's a statement to how broken our system is, that in a time of crisis, when we have the worst leadership imaginable, there's nothing that we could do about it but wait it out. And so looking to Joe Biden to fix this problem is not sufficient, because the die will be cast by January 21st. Unless there's something that we could do right now, so many more people are going to die because of the decisions and the actions of Donald Trump and Republican governors across this country. I think most certainly a Democrat would get in there and do a better job in managing this crisis, but that's just wishful thinking for the next, 9 months? June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, 7 months, 8 months. I had to count. So it's extremely frustrating for our system to be so poorly designed to not take into consideration that this country would devolve into a level of stupidity that they would elect a man who is perfectly designed to destroy this country based on his ego alone. Nobody considered. The founders must have always thought that Americans would have enough sense to elect someone who would not sit by and fiddle while the empire burned. They thought wrong. And that's a fundamental thing that we have to change about this. And it's almost too little too late. It's kind of like, you know what I mean? You figure out what's wrong and then you figure out a solution. You know, we need to change that system. We need to make sure that we're never stuck with a president until the next election when that president is directly responsible for people dying. All right. That's it for the public show. Patrons, stay tuned. We're going to go in a little bit more after the music. As always, if you want to access, go to patreon.com/the BPD show. If you don't, then I will see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for being a beautiful audience.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.